Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
So, Noah, do you ever look forward to someone evaluating the number of times or the percentage of times that you hallucinate?
No. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if that number was anywhere beyond zero, it would be deeply concerning to me.
Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of hallucination is. So,
I'm not hallucinating. I just have a fun time in my head.
So, well, not necessarily. So the term hallucination just means to have made up something that is different than what is in reality. So I'll give you, for instance, you're walking down the street and it's dark out and you look down and you think you see something, but you don't.
Gotcha.
You have hallucinated something.
I see. Almost like the whole I see water and then you get up and it's not water. It's just the way the light was hitting the pavement kind of a deal.
Exactly, right? Like that's a level of hallucination. And I was reflecting on that this week because there's a lot of justifiable scrutiny going on right now for the AI companies, particularly when they're rapidly releasing these models. And I thought I understood that there was a model that was released in the last week or two that had 1 trillion parameters into it. And with the level of complexity, that's kind of kicked off this idea that we should be tracking the level of hallucination that AIs are giving us. And so there's been a bunch of work that has been done. And do you want to guess what the current models approximate? And there's a little bit of wiggle room across all of them, right? There's some little difference and there's a margin of error. But you want to guess what they think the current hallucination rate for the most recent models of your favorite LLMs are?
25%.
Try again.
50%.
Much closer. So they're estimating about 48% hallucination. And this is up from 16% 3 LLM generations ago.
Wow.
So as we get more complicated, turns out that not just computers, not just humans, the more complicated things get, the harder it is to get the information right.
Who'd have thunk it?
Right? So how do you feel about that now that the world is moving towards a coin flip in terms of whether you're getting accurate information out?
I'm going to be very honest with you. I kind of feel like, to a degree, we as human beings should have been much more skeptical of information we had on the internet anyway. And so if AI is what gets us to finally start thinking about it, maybe that's not a terrible thing.
Sure. That sounds interesting. Anyways, let's go with no AI here. Do you want to handle some feedback?
I love it. Let's do this first. 855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Frizzo joins us in the interactive Mumble room. You can do that by going to mumble.mindrib1.com. Welcome in, Frizzo.
Hi, Noah and Steve.
Hey.
I would like to share my journey to try to move all my chat apps into one platform. So I tried to do that using Matrix. I set up a Matrix server with a WhatsApp bridge, and that worked pretty good. But then I tried to find a Matrix client to use the Matrix server, but there I found a lot of problems. So I tried using Element, Element X, and a bunch of applications, but none of them worked very well. So in the end, I stumbled upon Beeper. Beeper is a Matrix-based service. It's used for, it's designed for merging all your chat applications into one. And you can you don't need to host a server, and you can use like 5 accounts for free. So yeah, I tried using that, and it works pretty well, but I still had some issues with like sending messages. Some of them were not received by others. So yeah, I just wanted to share this and like wanted to know if you have any experience with this.
Sure. So I'll let Steve go first because I'm guessing it's not going to be a long conversation.
Well, if you remember, my my road down this path actually was a similar one, which led me to actually trying to stand up. Well, I did. No, I stood up my own Matrix instance and stuff like that. And I did not get to anything that was suitable for the average person. I was willing to fight through the paper cuts, but when messages just weren't flowing, that was no bueno. And we put the brakes on that, and we just went back to individual apps.
Do you have specific questions that we can help you with? Or is it?
Yeah, maybe like what Matrix client would be suitable for using with bridges?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I would tell you that when it comes to, first thing with bridges, the first thing I would tell you about bridges is that when they fail, it's catastrophic because, and I'm guessing, Steve, this played into it for you a little bit. Communication it's a horrible failure because you don't know that it's failed. Right. And so if you're missing messages or somebody thinks they sent you a message and you didn't receive it, and like you said, Steve, I don't forget exactly how you phrased it, but when the messages stopped flowing, that was when you had to put the brakes on it because it's just not practical at that point. And so I would tell you that bridging in particular is always going to be somewhat of a challenge because if it fails catastrophically. With that disclaimer out of the way, there are good bridges and there are bad bridges. So bad bridges, or where you're going to have the worst experiences with publicly hosted bridges. They come up, they go down, they're overtaxed, they're overused, and so they have a much higher failure rate. Privately hosted bridges, you're going to get a little bit better. However, in my experience, what I found is it is entirely dependent upon the platform you're bridging to. So Telegram, Signal, those work very, very well. I have an organization that just insists on using GroupMe. Why? I don't know, but that's just the path they landed on. And the problem with GroupMe is Microsoft doesn't really do a lot in the way of support. And so trying to get an open source thing to talk to a proprietary thing does not always work terribly well. I've noticed similar issues with tying it to Facebook Messenger. It worked great for a while, and then Facebook changes something, and then it kind of falls apart. So for me, I've kind of gone down the path of, I started with Matrix, then I went to hosting my own bridges, and eventually what I landed on was the Beeper. And what I like about Beeper is they handle all the bridging for you. It's free. The downside is twofold. First of all, there's a limit to how many bridges you can do for free. Second limitation is they support like, I don't know, whatever it is, 6 or 7 of the many bridges that are available. And then you need to use their app. If you don't sign into their app or use it on a routine basis, it will sign you out of the bridges thinking that you're not using it, which again, I understand, but there are some hoops to jump through. So the way that it's kind of broken down, at least in my life, is I have my own server that I use for close family, immediate family, and it's just, that's how the school gets a hold of us, that sort of thing. And then it's Beeper for everything else. So all of the public things, all of the things that have to be tied or bridged or whatever else, I use Beeper. Does that help you?
Yeah, so I have a question about Beeper because like right now I'm using Beeper also, but I'm using the feature of Beeper where you can host the bridges on your own device. So on my phone, it's hosting the WhatsApp bridge. And I have problems where if I open the app, sometimes you have to wait for like a minute or two for it to connect to the bridge. And also I have the issue that when I send a message, sometimes it takes quite a while for the message to send, or sometimes it doesn't even send it at all. So you have to try again.
So I'll be honest with you. I've never used the self-hosted beeper bridges. Everything I've done, my rationale kind of goes like this. If I want to maintain the security and privacy and all of those sorts of things, I'm probably just doing it entirely myself. The second I am going to use somebody else's app or somebody else's thing, I'll just let them run the bridge. And so I use the Beeper Cloud aspect of it, and that has worked really well for me. I'm not sure if that's helpful to you, or if that destroys something that you were looking for by way of security.
Yeah, I could try using the cloud version. Yeah, the only downside is that you don't have end-to-end encryption this way.
Correct.
But it seems like the Beeper wants to move towards only on-device bridges. They seem to want to discontinue the cloud version.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see why, right? It costs them money. It's a lot of overhead for them. As we previously discussed, having a publicly accessible bridge it's very taxing. It's very difficult. And frankly, this was never how Matrix was designed to work, right? It was designed to be tiny little clusters of messaging that can interoperate. It was never designed to be these big, huge, massive deployments, which is kind of what it's turned into, which is in some ways unfortunate. And in other ways, it was very predictable because that's the way that everybody is used to using messaging. So of course, people are going to go sign up for the free accounts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your insight.
You bet. Thanks for joining us this evening, and stop back and let us know how it goes. Okay.
Okay, I will.
855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Our first email tonight comes in from all the way back up here. Dustin. Dustin writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I've been tasked with finding a security camera system for my church. Easy peasy, right? The kicker. I have $2,000 for a budget for 8 to 10 cameras. Leadership has been looking at off-the-shelf 8 to 10 camera systems under $1,000. About 18 months ago, I'd worked a proposal for a Synology surveillance station, 10 cameras. I felt like $5,000 was a price tag to make it happen. Requirements: online access to all cameras 24/7. Reasonable, decent night vision. We have a lot of dark spots around our building, and at least a week's worth of stored footage. Motion alerts for certain cameras. How close can we get within my budget with surveillance station from Synology, my preferred method? Is there an off-the-shelf system that you'd recommend in that price range? Thanks, Dustin." So, Steve, I want to talk to you about Reolink, and the reason I want to talk to you about Reolink is I've been very vocal of my love for access cameras, and I continue to think that they are some of the best cameras out there. However, there's a price tag associated with them, and you've had some really great luck with Reolink cameras. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know what? I took your advice initially and got a couple of access cameras, and we bought them used. And as you do, your mileage is going to vary how much life they're going to have left in them. And so both of them eventually kicked the bucket. So I've decommissioned both of the access points that I had, and in the process, I ended up going and looking for some sort of alternative, and I found the Reolink. And I will make the disclaimer that this is the Ethernet only ones. So I have no experience with the Wi-Fi based ones. I don't know. I've heard conflicting reports as to whether or not the Wi-Fi ones are different in terms of like, do they have RTSP enabled, or can you enable them, and like all of that sort of stuff, because I don't know whether they support that, or some of them have, like the solar ones have different options enabled or allow you to enable to save battery and all that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, I have 6-7 Reolink cameras, and I'm quite happy with them, to include the doorbell camera. Except for the doorbell camera, you were able to set them up without the app. And to be clear, for the doorbell camera, I installed Windows in a VM in like the 30-day trial. I installed their stupid app. I never signed into it, but the issue is that they don't allow you to set certain parameters on some of the cameras out of the gate, and so you actually have to have the app to go and like toggle that on. So for example, they all have a web interface. Not all of them have the web interface enabled immediately, and so I've had exactly one of my 7, which was the doorbell, that I had to have this to just go in and click the little slider saying turn on the web front end, and then Home Assistant was able to take care of the rest. And the reason why that's important is because Home Assistant refuses to talk to them without a password. And you can't really set a password without getting to the device to set a password. So even though the port's open and it says, yeah, I can talk to the thing, it was not Home Assistant for security reasons or something will not even attempt to interact with your cameras without a password. So that was my little foible, but ever since then, I've blocked them from the internet. They're not allowed to talk out. If they get updates, they get it pushed through Home Assistant and the Reolink integration, and they have a local, like you can curl against them locally to do whatever you want to do with them. I think they're fantastic.
So Reolink might be a really great option if you're looking for a budget-friendly camera that is going to work really well out of the box, work with open source software, and not require you to give up information, not require you to sign up for an account, those sorts of things. Now, it's interesting, Steve. I actually installed my first Reolink wireless doorbell camera, and here was our experience. Now, I wasn't actually on the install team. I'm hearing this secondhand, but what I was told was that they needed to use an app to get the thing set up, and then you have 2 choices. Either you go the app route or you do RTSP, but you cannot do both. And if you go the RTSP route, it disables all of the functionality by way of you push the doorbell. It doesn't act like a doorbell. It is just a camera. How did you work around some of that? And I understand your disclaimer that yours wasn't the Wi-Fi version, and so some of these challenges you don't share. But how did you deal with the effectively the doorbell notification portion of it?
Yeah, so because they all have local, we'll call it local API, you can hit them with curl or something like that. And in my case, I'm just making a straight up web HTTP GET request. So something watches the API for the doorbell press action. In my case, it's Home Assistant. It could literally be anything because that's exposed if you know what you're looking for. So Home Assistant catches the fact that there is a button press that has happened. Then it fires off an HTTP request to take a snapshot, because all of the Reolink cameras can take just a still image at the point that you tell it to, and it saves that image. Then it creates just a message body which just says someone's at the door, and then you append whatever chat you want. So in my case, I'm using Telegram, and Telegram, just like Matrix has room IDs, Telegram has a chat ID. If you give it the chat ID and you've worked with the bot father on Telegram to allow access to that channel, then it literally is just take this picture, put this message with it, and send it to this ID, this chat ID. And so that's how we get it. But like I was telling you in the pre-show, it also works as a regular doorbell. So that it rings, it produces noise. So it's got a little plug-in speaker that you can move anywhere in the house, or at least I've not found a limit to it. And that rings when somebody pushes the doorbell. So you get buzz to your phone, and so Telegram will tell you, Home Assistant will tell you, and you get the actual audible ping in the house that someone's at the door.
So you have a flow that you worked out, and you were saying you can do this any which way you like.
Yeah, because it's just a curl or an HTTP GET request against the camera to go get the picture off of the camera, and then anything, Bash, Python, Perl, whatever you want, they can all talk to Telegram, provided that you've got the API key, and just grab that image and send it to Telegram.
1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. So if I woke up in your shoes, Dustin, and I were looking for a camera system, I think the first thing that I would do is I'd probably go with your gut to get a surveillance station. So now we've spent $500-600. in an effort to keep the price down, I think what I would do is I would buy. Typically, I tell people when they're buying surveillance stations, buy 2 drives and then mirror them so that if one dies, you're good. In your case, what I would say, keep it bare bones. Get as cheap of a drive as you can. If you want more space, then maybe consider used. If you think you can live with it, go with a little bit less space. And then what we'll do is we'll just reduce the frame rate to get the recordings to cycle more. Now, it's kind of difficult to say, I understand why your church is going to say, well, we want a week's worth of footage. That can be a really difficult thing to do. Okay. So, and I'll explain why. There's a shopping mall that we do the IT support for. And in the shopping mall, there is the hallway. That camera will go, I could go back a year and a half and I could find what happened a year and a half ago because recordings just don't happen that often. But you go into one of the main mall corridors and I mean, the same amount of data that is consumed in maybe a year and a half or 2 years of a maintenance hallway is consumed in, 3 hours because of how many people just come and go. Right. And so it entirely depends on how much foot traffic is. I will tell you most of the time when we just give you some ballpark data, often we will sell 1, 2, 4, or 8 terabyte drives. And we typically aim for about 30 days. So I don't think you're going to have any trouble getting 8 to 10 8 to 10 cameras with about a week's worth of time, even if you put in like a 1 terabyte drive. But it'll depend on the resolution. It'll depend on the frame rate. It'll depend on how much traffic is actually going through there. I'm going to make a plug for Axis used cameras. They support them far longer than most places would, and most manufacturers would. The Axis, I think it's the 2035, double check because it's either the 2035 or 2036. One of them is supported by Surveillance Station, one is not. They all will do RT SP, so you can use them all. But the kind of nice thing about where you buy one of the supported cameras is it will do things like it will talk to the built-in motion detection. So Axis has basically little apps that will run on the camera, and it will do all of the motion detection on camera, and it's really good. But you could pick up. We have a particular model, and I will get it before the end of the show, and I'll have it in the show notes. But we basically found a set of dome cameras. Here it is, the P3367. So this camera has night vision. It has audio if you want to add a microphone in, and you can pick them up all day long on eBay for between $50 and $75. So I'm looking right now. There's one on eBay for $45, $14 shipping and handling. There's another one here, free shipping and handling, $75. So if I were trying to keep it under that $2,000, and you say, okay, if you got 10 cameras, $750 plus, $500 for the NVR, that gets us to $1,250, and then let's call it $250 for a hard drive. We're at $1,500. And you're going to need some licensing. So licensing on Synology is $50 per camera. So if you do 10 licenses, you're another $500. There's our $2,000. So that's somewhere where I would start and kind of work your way back from there. If you need any help acquiring cameras, sourcing used cameras, getting it set up, please reach out. Fire an email off to help@altaspeed.com and say, hey, we're looking to get some IT guys to come alongside us and help us, and we would be delighted to be able to help you. And do me a favor, write back in. Let us know how this works, right? Your feedback is extraordinarily important. How did we do? Did we get it right? Did we make good suggestions? Did it fall apart? How'd that work out? Our third email comes in from Das Geek. He says, listening to your show as a true fanboy would, and I heard a listener looking for a recommendation on a small laptop. I'd like to suggest the Framework 12-inch laptop with a stylus. Framework not only comes with the proper high-quality display, but a solid build and supports Linux design out of the box. Additionally, it's fully modular, repairable, and upgradable. Not just the RAM or the disk drive. You can upgrade the entire motherboard, ports, screens, and GPU. Framework supports full user control and ownership. Love your show, love your face. Your friend, Ryan, Das Geek. So if anybody knows hardware, it would be Das Geek. And so if he suggests the 12-inch, I'm inclined to agree. I would like to know what the big distinction between the 12-inch and the 13-inch. What drives a person, Ryan, or anybody else, to go for the 12-inch model. Here's why I asked that. I had an opportunity to see the 12-inch model in person when I was at OpenSauce this year, and Framework was there, and they were very excited to show off the 12-inch computer. Things I noticed about it, because of the like ruggedized case, and because of it's a like laptop 2-in-1 kind of a deal, a little bit fatter, a little bit thicker. The other thing I noticed is the actual footprint wasn't that much smaller than the 13-inch. So I'm curious what drives the decision to go with the 12 over the 13. Do you feel like you get that much savings? Is it the 2-in-1? Is that an appeal? Is that an appealing aspect of it? Is it the ruggedized case that you like? It's a little bit more sturdy. Let me know. Live at AskNoahShow.com. Oops, not that button. This button.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of October 5th, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. Proxmox Mail Gateway has released version 9.0. GNU Cache 5.13 is out. GNU Octave 10.3 is also available. OpenSSL 3.6 has been released. Docker 28.5 is out. ChairoDoc 3.6 is now available. And the GNU Linux Libre kernel for 6.17 has been released. In distro news, TinyCore 16.2 is now available, and OpenSUSE Leap 16 has been released. In open source AI news, Shenzhen Nashan People's Hospital has released a spine endoscope atlas, an open source dataset for surgical instrument segmentation. Huawei's new open source technique shrinks LLMs to make them run on less powerful, less expensive hardware. IBM releases their 4th version of their open source Granite generative AI models, and IBM becomes the first major open source AI model developer to earn ISO 42001 certification.
We had one more email. For whatever reason, I skipped right over it. That's terrible on me. But here's what I want to say before we get to our last email. The whole premise of the show, the reason that we set out to do this in the first place, was to come alongside Linux nerds that are on the internet and help them step through what it's like to drive Linux day in and day out. So it doesn't matter if you are a newbie and you're listening to this and you're like, geez, I listen to this podcast and I have no idea what those guys are talking about. I have no idea. I don't even understand the language they're talking about, let alone what it means and how it works. That's okay. Stick with us. We're going to get you there. If you've never touched a Linux machine before, we aim to be a show that welcomes you, brings you into the fold. Yeah, some of the vernacular is going to go over your head, but you know what? The fastest way to learn a new language is to immerse yourself in it. I studied Japanese for months leading up to going over to Japan because I wanted to learn how to fit in and do all of the things. And you know what? I learned more in 72 hours of walking around Japan, and specifically if you get outside of Tokyo where everybody kind of speaks English and you have to learn how to speak Japanese if you want to, eat. I learned it much faster there. And so my invitation to you, stick with us. Stick with us, and it will eventually start to soak in like osmosis. At the same time, if you're at the other end of the spectrum, if you're a software developer, if you work in system administration, if you do this professionally, ask your questions or bring your expertise to bear. Tell us what works for you. Tell us where your struggles are. But we are coming to a really exciting time, I believe, in the Linux world in which people are going to be bailing off of other platforms because they don't want an operating system that takes screenshots of everything they do, because they don't want to have to sign up for an online account and have an internet connection so that they can sign into their computer, because they don't want their hardware to go out of date 4 or 5 years after they spent $1,000 or $1,200 or $1,500 to buy a computer. They don't want to do that. And so if that's you, you also stick along for the ride. But here's what you have to do. I need you to open up your email client and write an email to live@asknoahshow.com. Questions? Between Steve and I, we can likely answer your question. I can handle it from the small business side. I can handle it from the front end user support side. I spend a lot of time, probably more time than I should, moving people from proprietary platforms over to Linux and getting them comfortable in that environment and then answering their questions and providing follow-up for that. Steve has spent more than a decade working professionally at a very high level in some of the largest recognizable corporations that are out there. And so between the two of us, we promise we've got something for you. But it starts with you opening up that email client and writing into live@asknoahshow.com and saying, hey, here's my question, or here's my particular struggle. Here's what is working. Here's what isn't working. And then follow up. Hey, thanks for the information. Here's what worked for me. Here's the path I ended up taking. That's important because it closes the loop and allows us the next time a question comes up for us to be able to answer that differently and or double down on it and say, hey, here's what's working really well for people. But you have the power to direct the show. And it's part of why we address feedback right off the top. We want to put you, the listener, in the driver's seat. Our last email comes in from Kevin. Kevin says, hey guys, just curious if you have a set of Linux basics that I can reference or something to point me to. Also, what's the bell that goes off during your show? My assumption is that's an indicator for your editor when scrubbing through the timeline to pick up notable items. Thanks, and keep up the great work. So there's a funny story with the bell. I'll address that first, and then, Steve, I'm going to ask you about Linux basics. A long time ago, Chris Fisher shared an article with me that talked about the essential tools for every podcaster. And one of the tools on there was a bell. And I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. It didn't really resonate with me or hit me at the time. And then I started doing Critical Thought 9 to noon on KNOX. And it's very, very caller driven. So 3 hours a day, and it's usually churning one call after the other. And callers are a bit like customers at a restaurant. There's some that you like. There's some that you don't like. There's some that you want to spend a lot of time with. There's some that you wish they would make their transaction and move along. And what I noticed was I didn't have any way to reward the things I liked and a way to punish the things that I didn't like. So to a degree, punishment goes out right out the door because nobody will call your program if you're rude to them or mean to them or slap their hand, that sort of thing. So that goes out the road. So now I'm left with all I can do is reward the thing that I want to see. And so I circle back to that comment in my head about the bell. And I downloaded a high resolution WAV file of a desk bell. Entered that into the hotkey system, and I started to use that as a way when somebody made a really good point, or when somebody said something that I agreed with, or when they nailed it, and I really thought that was noteworthy, they got the ding. And what happened over time is people started to try to earn the ding. They'd call in and they would try to earn the ding. And so it was wildly successful there. And I thought, well, I'm going to bring it over to Ask Noah. And so if you hear the ding, go back and listen to what happened in the last, 5-7 seconds preceding the ding, and you'll see what we're trying to draw attention to. Now to your question. A set of Linux basics. So Steve, if your son or your friend or your wife or a friend at church came to you and said, Steve, I know you're the Linux guy. You use that Linux stuff all the time. In fact, you even work for a little hatted company thing or whatever. How do you learn that thing? What would you tell them?
On what level are you trying to learn something? There's like developer style. There's, I just want to use the desktop as I would any other operating system. There's, I want to be a system administrator. There is, I want to tinker around in my home lab. There's so much to dig into that, right? And back in the day, used to be, well, we didn't want to drive you towards any documentation that gave you indications in the GUI, because if we're honest, the GUI stuff was kind of half-baked. Like you could get part of the way there, but then you'd have to drop to the terminal and then you'd come back to the GUI or some variation thereof. These days, that's not necessarily the case. Actually, I'd argue a lot of the sysadmin tools are really well polished on the front end. However, you will find still most of the guides relying on command line because, first of all, it's much easier and precise as a person giving instructions to say, type exactly this thing and hit enter. Not only that, it's much easier to put together like a blog or something that has that, as opposed to 5,000 screenshots with arrows going all over the place. And like, you know, so even though the graphical representation is there these days, and it really is, especially with Cockpit, with you know, Podman or Docker Desktop, or all of these sorts of things that you might look into with the front end, they are really good. It's just you're still going to find direction of how to do things on the command line because it's easier for the person giving the instructions to work that out. It's also more repeatable from a standpoint of like, I can cut and paste from my own article and verify that my steps work. It's a lot more effort to reset everything. Click, click, okay, wait, click, 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 okay, wait, right? Having said all that, what do you do for basics? Tough call. The reason why it's a tough call is because learning style is an issue. We had a kind of a debate in our pre-show about learning styles approximately, right? And someone's like, well, give them a bunch of instructions and have them do installations from the terminal and you'll learn a lot because, you know, you have to go and read. And my counter to that was, I've been doing this a long time and I just end up cutting and pasting out of that because my task is to get myself up and doing a thing as opposed to trying to learn the process of something. If I'm trying to learn the process of something, I'm building on existing knowledge and I'm really trying to grind through a problem with a purpose. If you don't have a problem and a purpose, the way that you learn, generally speaking, changes. Like it changes drastically, right? Because you're trying to cast a net wide and then you're fighting your own attention span and all that. So all that to say is, I'd say make use of modern things like, if you have a friend, sure, ask the friend all the questions that you think they'll bear. Having said that, go to an LLM, I think, for basic things. I want to stress this, for basic things. Reference the introduction. If you happen to have skipped over our introduction tonight, it's directly relevant to this conversation. But for simple things like, how do I do this? Or what is the NMCLI flag that does that thing? Or, you know, those sorts of things. The LLM is really good because, first of all, I don't know about you, Noah, but I have a hard time sometimes formulating my question in such a way that a search answer is going to give me a good result.
Right.
Because I'm fishing around for something I barely know.
Yeah, and oftentimes you're just throwing words together, right? You're like, network error, this not working on Ubuntu, you know, and you're trying to pull together different phraseology to try to just latch onto something on the internet.
Yep, exactly. So what would you do?
So I agree with you didn't say it this way, but what I heard you trying to say, which I entirely agree with, is saying, how do I get started with Linux is kind of like walking into a hardware store and saying, which tool should I start with? Well, depends on what you want to do. If you want to hammer some stuff, I'd check out the hammers. You want to cut some wood in half, I'd check out the saws. So it kind of depends. Here's the path I think I would recommend. If you want to learn Linux, the first thing I would do is get hands-on using it. It sounds probably kind of silly when I say it out loud like that, but that's the first thing I would do. The amount of stuff that I learned in Linux, not because, like Steve was saying, when you're scratching an itch, it just tends to imprint on your brain differently, at least it does for me, than if I'm reading and or following a tutorial to achieve a goal that I don't really care about. And so just using it day to day, playing with it, will cause you to bump into things that will force you to learn. Now, set your expectations accordingly. You should expect that for the first 3 days, you're going to feel like a fish out of water. You should expect for the first 3 months that you're going to be fighting uphill. And you should expect for about the first year for there to be things that just don't quite click or don't quite feel natural. But I submit to you, if you lived on Linux for a year, all the day-to-day stuff, all of the feeling where things are, how networking works, how installing packages work, what things are available, what things aren't, what things you have to work around, where the bones are buried, I would submit to you that about that year mark, you're going to start to feel pretty darn comfortable. You want to take it to the next level. When starting, start with something like Tails. Tails is quickly becoming one of my favorite Linux distributions. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, it is completely non-destructive to your system. So day one, you want to play with Linux. I'm going to listen to what those guys told me. If you just take an Ubuntu drive or a Fedora drive or an Arch drive and you plug it in and you blow away your Windows install or macOS or whatever it is you're using, and all of a sudden you have this Linux environment, it's going to feel great for 20 minutes. And then you're going to need to get something done for work, or you're going to need to get something done for school, or you're going to need to get something done with some sort of deadline. And that's an atrocious environment to learn in, because now your feet are against the fire. And so give yourself a pressure relief valve. And I think Tails does that in a couple of ways. I have taken Tails and been able to, and I've gotten myself to the point where I have a small little leather pouch that I carry with me. It's originally designed as a coin case. And inside of it, I have a Tails drive that has all of the applications I need and all of the data that I need to do most things. And it includes the tooling and data necessary for me to fight my way to more things if that's necessary. ISOs, all the things. So I have got myself into a point, and for, I don't know, probably the better part of a year, I only used this as often as I possibly could. This was the only computer I used. And I would pull out a laptop, any laptop, because it doesn't matter, because it's amnesic. It goes away as soon as you power the computer down. Any computer, any piece of hardware, and I plugged the Tails drive in and I would boot it up, and I just got myself into the habit of, here's the text editor I'm using, here's the web browser I'm using, here's the email client I'm using, here's the instant messaging that I'm using, here's some other software that I'm using. I can't get it. Okay, well, it's available as an app image. I can run it that way. And got myself to a point where I started to forget which hardware, because it didn't matter. I just grab a laptop, did not matter which laptop it was, and I was able to run on it. Now, I've since backed off on that a little bit, in part because there's a practical aspect of having to set your environment up all the time. But what it did was it taught me the concept of reproducibility in a forced way. That is to say, I knew I could reproduce my computing environment anywhere, because every time I turned the computer on, I was doing it. And so it got to be second nature. I don't think about what computer has data or what drive or how big. None of that even really fazed me anymore. I just got to the point of just give me a laptop, any laptop, and I'm able to use it. And to this day, that's still what I do for my personal laptop. I have one set up that I use for work because it's got some special security stuff on it and some configuration that I need. But personally speaking, I still use my little Tails drive. In fact, my personal laptop that sits inside of my little briefcase inside of my bedroom doesn't have an operating system installed on it. It's got data on the drive that's encrypted, but the operating system is my little Tails drive that I carry around with me. So I think it's a really, really excellent starting point for, I want to experience Linux, I want to click around, I want to play with stuff, and then Monday comes around, you're going back to work, just pull the drive out, restart the computer, and go right back to where you were. Whatever it is you're using today, keep using it. And I have been pleasantly surprised. Now, this is true. This changes when you get to the T2 stuff, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how well Tails works on Macs. So everything from, like, I'm going to say anything from 2011 to 2015 is going to be flawless. You're going to boot, and you would think you are on a computer that runs Linux natively. It's going to work so well for you. Shortly after 2015, they introduced the T2 chip. You can get Linux to run on it, but there's a little bit more of a challenge. And obviously, after they switched over to the M series, then it's just a real disaster. But there's a period of time, whether you're on Mac or you're running Windows, and these days, just about any x86 computer is going to run flawlessly with Linux right out of the box. There was a time where you had to compile drivers or you had to swap hardware together. That's all a thing of the past. For the most part, it just works out of the box. So unless you're using some very fancy special thing, like there's some computers that have displays built into the keyboard, or some of the tablets, some of the newer Surfaces and stuff, you might have a few challenges there. But for the most part, it's going to work right out of the box for you. Once you start getting comfortable with that, then the next thing I would do is I would go to something like Endless. Endless is a really great way for you to install something and not hurt yourself. So you can explore, you can play around, but it's immutable. So you really can't do any damage. You really can't break it. You really can't hurt yourself. And so that's a really great way. Once you think you're ready to take the plunge and say, okay, I feel like I got my work cut out for me. I feel like I know how to use this tooling system. Now let's install it for real on the system. And then I would run Endless for a while. And once you get comfortable there and you start to get your sea legs out from under you, so to speak, that's when I would start to play distro hop. And then I would play with Fedora, and I would play with Ubuntu, and I would play with Arch. And I would, if you want to take a while where you kind of got to throw away everything else you know about Linux, or everything you're wanting to learn about every other Linux distro to do this, but play with NixOS. If you're willing to do that, you can bounce around and start to find your home, what really works well for you. I think most advanced Linux users eventually come to Arch. And Steve, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. For me, the path, I will always be a Fedora fanboy at heart, in part because I love that Red Hat is an American company, in all their parts because I have been using it since Fedora Core 1, and it just makes me happy inside to watch that progression. It's not bleeding edge, but it's new enough. So I really like the mix they draw. From a work practical standpoint, let's face it, the most popular distro out there is Ubuntu. And so you need to be very, very comfortable with Ubuntu, especially if you're going to support it. And so that's the official operating system at Altispeed Technologies. We deploy Kubuntu for all of our guys at work, and we tell them you can install whatever you want. You can use whatever you want, but that's the officially supported distro. It's what we test against. It's what we know works. It doesn't let you down. It's just, it's old faithful, so to speak. So those are some great starting points. What I suspect will happen to you, as happens with most Linux users, they eventually wind up on Arch. And the reason that the laptop that's sitting in front of my face right this moment is running Arch is because it is devoid of any particular company, of any particular decision. It is just, you eventually get to a point, or at least I did, where I said to myself, I want the best ability to talk to hardware. And if you ask yourself what kernel does that best, it becomes a Linux kernel. And then I asked myself, what distro, what tooling do I want around that that's going to give me the best experience? And what I found after bouncing around all of them is Arch. It just works every single time. There just works. And when something breaks, a nerd on the internet fixes it very quickly. And then I run yay, and all of a sudden the newest package comes down, and then my problem is fixed. So I feel like I don't have to wait for anything. And particularly if you're living in a world of open source, you just get, it's just a better mousetrap for software. And then again, and this is me specific, I found that I just don't like desktop environments. I have gone to a tiling window manager in general. I want to take the hardware and I want to run software, either take over the screen or layer it, with side by side, or switch me desktop, virtual desktop, so to speak. But really past that, I have no need for any other window. I don't need animations. I don't need any of that stuff. I just want the application to show up on the screen. And so it doesn't matter if I'm using one screen or six. Everything stays consistent. It is much faster to execute keyboard shortcuts than it ever is to touch a mouse. So I never really have to touch a mouse, and I love it. And I just don't know if I could go back. What landed you ultimately on Arch, Steve?
Oh man, I don't even remember. It's been a decade and a half or more. When we moved down to the US, my Arch install was 11 years old at that point. So in 2021, something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't even remember that far back as to like why. If I was honest, I imagine it was, I heard a bunch of positive coverage about it at the time or leading up to it. And it kept bubbling up to the surface as something that I probably would enjoy for myself. And so at the time, I was the only one running Arch. I didn't push it on anybody else. And, back 15 years ago or more, Arch was more, it was more rough in terms of getting things up. The Arch Wiki was always awesome. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. But it was much more daunting to install your operating system from the command line from scratch way back then than it was to just grab something that had a nice UI installation process. So I like mean and lean. If I had to really venture a guess, it was because back then I was trying to strip down Ubuntu installs. That was back before they had the minimal install option. Mm-hmm. And I would be trying to strip them down because honestly, I felt like there's just a lot of garbage. And I didn't mean like not good software. I just meant like there's 3 different mail clients and 5 browsers and like all of this stuff. And I would just go through, and after doing an installation, I would basically just run a whole bunch of purges. And if I wasn't really careful, I'd end up bork something, or you break the meta package or something along those lines, which was a much bigger deal back then. So yeah, I imagine it was much more because I had a whole bunch of stuff running on my system, and I don't know why, because I didn't ask it for it.
Talk to me about the RHCSA and why that's a really good choice for somebody who wants to learn system administration.
Nice pivot. Completely out of the blue. Let me see if I can tackle this. So if you're talking about structured learning, it goes back to learning styles. For me, if I'm trying to get a broad survey of a topic, a structured learning environment is better for me at the beginning, just because I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm looking at. And oftentimes I draw inspiration from things around me. As a side note, I was one of those people that used to draw inspiration at university by listening to other people talk. And I used to think it was lazy, but as I continue to read through scripture and just get older, I feel like it's more listening to the wisdom of others and making up your own mind based on the wisdom of others. And so I took the same approach with when I'm trying to learn a new thing. It's like I need to do a broad survey in order to just understand the lay of the land if it's brand new to me. And I was taking the Red Hat exam since RHEL 5, so well before I started at Red Hat. And I like them. I think that they are a hands-on, practical. Yeah, okay, there's definitely some gotcha moments in there where they do something silly because they have to do something to make it difficult. But as a general rule, I really like them. I did the SUSE exams, I've done the Ubuntu exams, I've done the RHEL exams, I did the LPIC exams, I've done the A+ and all of those sorts of things. And I can tell you that my favorite by far was the Cisco and the Red Hat ones, by far. They both are, here, get your hands dirty, go do a thing.
Yes. Here's
a broken computer, fix it, like very task oriented, requiring you to know what you needed to know. And you had to know it cold because the clock would tick on you.
Yep.
And that's just the way it was.
I love it. One other thing I'm going to add to that, and I'll back up what Steve said. In fact, somebody sits in my office and they're asking for an interview. If I hear that they have any of the training like the RHCSA in which it's hands-on, that goes to the top of my list. So I second everything that Steve said. I'll also throw a plug out there for the Ubuntu Academy or the Canonical Academy. This is a thing that Canonical recently launched. You can learn more. We actually interviewed Adrian Frick. You can find that interview at podcast.asknoahshow.com/437. That's 437. And you can hear all about the training that they have put together. Again, very much like the Red Hat exams insofar as it's designed real world, hands-on, actually learning the thing. And we'll give you some really good resources, I think, to get started. The music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We record the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. We'd love for you to join us live. You can do that by going to asknoahshow.com. If you can't join us live, well, we release it as a podcast, so you can catch the reruns at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Head all the way back to episode 1. All the articles and resources that we use to build the show are there. We'll see you back next week at asknoahshow.com.